on the bus. I'll tell you a little bit about what I was doing that day and what I recall from the day's events. At the time, I was a reporter. I was actually a military correspondent for the Jerusalem Post, which is an English-language newspaper in Israel. Usually I would come into work around like noontime and then work till very late, because often I would be speaking with people in the United States, so there's a 6 or 7 hour time zone difference. So you come like around 12 and then stay very late. But I wanted to go to Tel Aviv that night with my girlfriend at the time to go to a club. So I was going to go early, go to the gym, and then finish up with work at a reasonable time, let's say around 6 or 7. So, waiting for the bus. This is on a street called Aza Street, and I lived on Aza Street at the time. We'd go to the local deli, ran into a former colleague who had worked at a bi-weekly magazine. We started chit-chatting, and eventually I get on the bus. Now, this was at the time of bus bombings in Israel, and so you're very cognizant of the fact that like a bus could blow up. So my strategy at the time was always, I'm going to sit at the back of the bus, because if a bus bomber gets on, he's going to get off at the front and start walking and probably blow up in the front or midway. So usually I would sit like back here, but I couldn't. It was jam-packed, the bus that day. So I got on, kind of forced my way, and I was standing here. In front of the rear door. That's as far as I could get. And I remember I'm like eating my sandwich and looking out, and all of a sudden it was as if someone took like a baseball bat and like cracked you over the head. And you hear this like high-pitched squeal. And I'm hearing a high-pitched squeal. You know, like where this is a test of the emergency broadcasting system. Imagine that ramped up really loud. I didn't hear an explosion, and I'll tell you why a little bit later, why if you're very close to a bombing, you don't hear the explosion. And at first I think it's like a dream. Did I, when I was like sort of daydreaming, did I lean over and hit my head against the glass? And I realized the bus has stopped, there's no glass, and there's smoke. And I realized, oh, it's a bombing. But I can't move. I'm sort of, one of the things I always wondered about when you would hear a bombing going off in Jerusalem, there'd always be that 5 minutes of quiet before people would start screaming and stuff like that. And I always wondered about that, like what's with that 5 minutes of quiet? And I realized people are in shock. I mean, really, not just like, oh my God, you're in shock, but like you can't function. Like I couldn't move, I couldn't talk. I was like almost like, the way I described it was like imagine like there's a fish hook under your jaw, and you're being pulled up almost on your tippy toes. And so I think, okay, I'm in a bombing. I can't move. I can't talk. I'm in a lot of pain. I'm dying. So that was like the first option. And like a minute or two go by. Okay, maybe I'm not dying. Maybe I'm just paralyzed for life. And you're working through all the various scenarios. And I don't know, at one point in time, I don't know if I had fallen over or if I was always on the ground. It's very hard sometimes to remember exactly the details. But I'm on the ground, like about here. And I'm looking down my leg. And I'm seeing like all these sort of like cuts in the leg, in the jeans. And I see this sort of torn, ripped open, like dappled with blood flesh. And I'm like, oh my God, that's my leg. I've lost it. I've lost the leg because, it was shredded. Eventually, this was very near the Prime Minister's house. It was like just up the street. So like an undercover cop comes up from behind, comes out, pulls out like his policeman's hat from like his back pocket. And at that point, I'm like, I was so gone. I was like, my Hebrew was just like completely, like I'd completely forgotten it. I just said to him in English, just said, help me, I can't breathe. And so he lifted me up, pulled me out, and laid me down on the ground. And, I get down on the ground, And I guess the reporter in me kicks in, because the first thing I'm thinking about after I'm in excruciating pain, my shoulder, my hands are burned, turns out that torn flesh was someone else's. So imagine, that someone else pulled, it was about an arm's length of flesh that was just pulled off of my leg. And so I'm lying down on the ground, excruciating pain, but I'm trying to count the dead bodies because I want to call in the story to the Jerusalem Post. And so I don't want another reporter to scoop me. So, and I'm trying to reach into these jeans, like these super skinny jeans that my girlfriend at the time liked, but like my hands are burned and I can't reach into the pocket to get the phone, and I'm like, fuck it. Someone else will get the story. And so at the time I counted about 7 dead. There was a guy who was sitting here who was slumped over. There was someone else slumped over. All around me, basically, there were people dead in the front of the bus. And I realized I'm waiting there for about 15, 20 minutes. And I realized I am definitely not one of the worst case scenarios here, because if I was one of the worst case scenarios, I would have been pulled away in an ambulance within 5 minutes. I mean, the first responders there, they work like a well-oiled machine. I mean, within 5 minutes, there were ambulances on the scene. They were pulling away the most serious cases. I had spoken with a girl as a reporter when I started going back to work, and she was one of the victims. And she told me she was in the back of the bus. She had seen the suicide bomber. He was waiting in the back of the bus. He got up, started walking forward. And I'm assuming it was the bearded guy, the Chezi Goldberg. He gives him he was studying, reading Psalms or a religious book. And the suicide bomber gave him this body check. And Chezi looked up at him what's up? What are you doing? And the guy gave him this smirk, you'll see in a second. And that's when he detonated. And this is what this woman had told me. And when I was interviewing her, she was this really beautiful girl, almost like the belle of the ball. All the boys would chase after her and stuff like that. And her whole identity was in that. I was hit in the back, in the legs and in the back. She was hit in the face. So she was scalped and was in such serious condition that when they first got to, she was in the back, thrown out of the bus, they thought she was dead. I mean, she was so mauled. She actually had to lift a hand for them to come, because they had she was in critical condition. They weren't sure whether she was in a coma for a little while, and she was telling me about her nightmares of dreaming about headless people, often which is completely understandable. When I had nightmares in the hospital, it was something to do with it was something related with shoes or a leg or my leg giving out or something like that. It was all associated with the injury. And so, I remember we were talking about, the different experiences. Did you hear the blast? No, of course not. You're too close. It's basically the sound wave hitting your ear. You get this ringing sound. It's tinnitus. And so we figured out that actually I was closer to the bomber than she was. And she had this sort of she didn't mean it in an accusatory way, but it was just sort of how did you survive? Or how did you get off so light? And I didn't. It's just sort of the angles of the blast. He was holding the bomb in a bag. I think it was about 7 to 10 pounds worth of explosive, and it wasn't on a vest. It was in a bag. So who knows how he was holding it? Maybe the blast had to travel through him to get to me. Maybe he was part of the buffer. I don't know. But it was interesting. I eventually was able to talk with, when I went back as a reporter, I talked with a would-be suicide bomber, child suicide bomber, like 14 years old. He was actually underdeveloped, so they thought when you first heard reports about it, they talked about 12-year-old suicide bomber. But he was actually 14. He might have even been 16, but he was like about yay high. He looked like you just would have thought he was like a fifth grader. And I spoke with the people who sent these people out, the dispatchers, 2 guys in prison. They're smart dudes. They're really smart people. They view this, they view the suicide bombers basically artillery shells. They're not part of the terrorist clique. They're not your comrades in arms against the occupier or whatever. They're just people who walk in and you use them. And that's it. And of course you just say, oh, what great martyrs they were and how great it was that they served the cause. But they're not part of the team. And those are the people who you can't hate this suicide bomber so much. He's a pathetic individual. But the guys who use them, they're pure evil. And that's basically my story in a nutshell. If anyone wants to ask any questions, that's kind of what I'm here for.
Where was the bomber at?
The bomber, from what I've been told, he was sitting in the back seat, got up, and I'm estimating, he probably blew up around right here. That's where he blew up.
If you look at the image,
yeah,
the picture, for those of you who are in the forensic world, you can kind of see.
Yeah, so in the picture here, he would probably be about here. That's probably the epicenter of the explosion.
Okay. Erik, was this the bus you normally took?
Yes, because I would go to, at the time, my editor and I said we were going to join this gym on Mount Scopus. And eventually, he pussied out from going to the gym every day, and I was just left going to the gym by myself.
No offense, ladies.
And so I was just just got on, and this was like my normal bus, and that was why when the bomb went off, and the woman I was living with had heard about it. She knew it was the right time. It was number 19. She had called around to various hospitals, and then she was in class at the time. She heard that I was on the list of the people admitted, but they couldn't say what condition I was in. So she completely freaked out and drove over. My parents were in Israel at the time because my brother had a kid. He was being circumcised, and there was like a whole family to do and whatnot. And so it was actually the first time that my parents had met my girlfriend, which was in the hospital waiting to see whether I was going to come out with, one leg or two. Because what happened was the shrapnel had severed the main vein under the knee, broke the knee too, and I was bleeding internally. I lost about 6 units of blood, and fractured shoulder blade and burns on my back and legs, back of my legs. But it was really, it was really amazing that they were able to stitch everything up, and that I've got 2 legs. And that is incredible, because I remember that as I'm being carried into the hospital, they're asking me to, my name, and do I have, any, kin or family in the country. And at some point in time, they asked me to wiggle my toes, and I can't. And I hear the nurse saying to the doctor, "That's not good." And I'm like, oh crap, because when you hear the medical, so don't say that. Just don't say that. Just lie to the victim. Just simply say, "You're fine. You'll be great." Don't say in earshot, "That doesn't look good." That just freaks them out. So.
Classic Israeli.
Yeah. Sure.
Approximately how many people were on the bus, and where were the majority of the survivors located?
I mean, I guess just imagine a bus where it gets to the point where it's, I mean, people are crowded around each other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I couldn't estimate. I mean, just take any city bus and just jam-pack with people, and I guess that's how you get the number. But if I had to guess, I never actually figured out where the majority of the people were killed, but I would assume the majority of the people were killed were back here. I mean, it was if you remember that video, it was like a butcher shop.
Yeah.
I mean, there was just hanging pieces of meat. And that's what was left to some people. I mean, people were cut in half. So my guess is the majority of people would be right here.
Was there anything from the investigation that you know of regarding the type of bomb that was used?
Whether what the chemical composition was, I don't think it was TATP, triacetone triperoxide. That was like, that's a common bomb in that part of the world, simply because you can make it from like household products, but it's very unstable. I think it might have just been standard, like, I don't know what, I think fertilizer was or seed or any like high explosive. I know it was 3.5 kilos. So that would be
3.5 kilos?
Yeah, 3.5 kilos. So it's about, what's it, like 8, 9 pounds? Something around there.
Did they ever state why they did this particular button?
Why? No, I don't think they had they had anything particular against the number 19. I think it was just that there's always, I mean you have to get into you always have to get into like the rationale of the suicide, the campaign itself. The campaign was just basically to inflict as much pain on Israeli civilians as possible. And the idea, I think they had a very flawed strategy. It basically was, if you're talking about, let's say there are 3 main groups among the Palestinians. There's Fatah, which is sort of secular nationalist, conservative mostly Muslim, but you have Christians in it as well. Then you have Hamas, which was acronym for the Islamic Resistance Movement, outgrowth of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. Basically they want Sharia state from the river to the sea, and they're not looking for a 2-state solution. Then you have the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is more of the same. And this one was, I think, Fatah/Hamas operation. Fatah's calculations probably in blowing up stuff in Israel is to basically say, look, your policemen can't protect you. Your soldiers, they can't protect you. The only way this is ever going to stop is if you do what we tell you to do. And that was the way they want to convey it. Now, if you're Fatah, you're basically trying to argue for a 2-state solution that's favorable on your territorial terms, as opposed to the Israeli territorial terms. So it's limited aims war, but it was kind of, at least in my opinion, kind of stupid. Because what it did was it only conveyed to the Israelis that it played into their fears that, oh, this is not happening in the West Bank, this is happening within Israel. So it's all up for grabs. So it actually just made Israelis more determined. It didn't, people still didn't go to buses more often. They maybe were more personally scared about their safety. But they didn't give in to the demands of the terrorists.
Yeah, Eric, I had heard that one of the reasons it was done on that day, January 29, 2004, is because the next day the Israeli government was supposed to be releasing Palestinian prisoners. And so the organization went into Israel. It's really nasty because they wanted to do this so that the Israelis would say, oh, forget it, we're not doing the prisoners, we're not letting them go now. That's what they're hoping for. That's at least my logic. And that would then make people go, what? and then more attacks. So it's a weird cycle.
You never know. You never know.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are different theories that sometimes groups do it to outbid each other. If, let's say, one group has committed 15 terrorist attacks that year, the other one has to go, oh crap, we're losing street cred, so we have to do 20, and then they have to up each other, or it might be something they're trying to coerce the Israelis into doing something, or perversely make situation more worse in their own area to drum up more support. So the more misery, they feed off the misery. So if the situation's even more miserable, then you have even more, and it becomes like this vicious cycle. So I don't know. I'm not gonna. There are different theories, and there are many academics who can have long and interesting debates about the motives. I guess you guys are more interested in terms of
How to stop it.
yeah, how to stop it. Anything else?
Did they know how long he was on the bus?
He was one of the first.
So,
How long was it? I don't know. Probably quite some time. The thing is that, people knew. I was explaining this that you can't do. It's very hard to do profiling, especially because, especially for Israelis, they live in the Middle East. The Arab population of Israel citizens, equal citizens, voting rights, whatever, are a fifth of the population. And then on top of that, you have Israeli Jews who themselves have come from Middle Eastern countries. So you can't just go like, you can't do just based upon how he's dressed or what he looks like or the fact that he's got a backpack. There have to be additional factors. So the fact that an Arab guy from Bethlehem got on and is carrying a bag, the Israelis just can't, just interrogate every Arab guy with a bag. They have to be a little bit more sophisticated. And sometimes what happens is that guys slip through. It is what it is.
How many times before your incident was this route bombed?
Number 19 itself, I don't think it was ever. I think it was the first for the number 19. But I know that right after I had gotten released, 2 weeks, I'm at home, and a bus blows up a couple of blocks away from where this bus blew up. I remember it, and the ambulances are coming up my street. And it's certain things if you're in a suicide bombing campaign, there's certain things you already know. You know that 5 minutes of silence after a bombing. You know whenever you hear 3 ambulances or something like that coming up in rapid succession, you're like, it was a terrorist attack. So I heard the 3 ambulances, and I'm like, I just came back from this. And I turn on the TV, and lo and behold, it's a suicide bombing just a couple blocks away. I think a lot of teenagers were killed in that one, because it was it was a bus used by kids going to school. Because they don't use it's not like the yellow buses here. Kids just use city buses for the most part.
Right up the street from where it happened. In fact, I was just over there a couple months ago, and I took footage of the corner where it all happened. And literally 100 yards, left 50 yards, right up the street in the direction of the way the bus is going, is the Prime Minister's home.
Yeah.
It's right there. And
why right next door to him.
Yeah, and why this guy decided to blow it up there and not right in front of the Prime Minister's home. Somebody didn't plan right.
Who knows? Either he might have thought, hey, it's close enough, or I don't know, that cafe on that same street was also blown up. Moment Cafe right up the street. So that was also, there've been a lot, and then there was on the same street there was also a guy who tried to put rat poison in the food or something in one of the cafes. Sometimes they'll, I had to be checked for the shrapnel. Sometimes they coat the shrapnel in poison. I can't imagine that would be very effective, because I'm sure it would just burn off, but who knows? Maybe they're just for added measure. And so it was just one of the things they had to check.
Before the attack, did you have any apprehension about, because I've talked to some other people, and they talked about when they used to get on a bus, they would always kind of look around and see if they could see anything that looked abnormal.
I never presumed that I would be able to spot. Like, I was never trained to look for someone suspicious. So I just got on the bus and tried to sit in the back, and that's it. And you just sort of, like, kind of take your chances. Now, what, I would still ride the bus after the bombing. It was a little, but I would try to, stand between two really fat people. Let them take it. So, anyway, so.
Since
Did you know
the
anybody
event,
on that bus?
No, I didn't know anyone on the bus.
I was going to say Chezi Goldberg, that one gentleman, his sister,
his
the
sister
photojournalist.
contacted me, and because I had written about my experiences, and she had contacted me right afterwards, and she had said that the guy that I had described in the story seemed to match her brother, and in all likelihood it was probably her brother, because he just sort of fit. He was a religious man. And likely he was the religious man reading, Psalms on the bus, and that's probably what happened. But other than that, I did start to get in contact with other people from the number 19, but I didn't want to be, like, I'm coming down here. I usually don't do this. I usually don't come out and speak about my experiences because it's something that happened in the past and it's something that doesn't define me. I have a job. I work in PR. I was a journalist, yada, yada, yada. This is just one moment in my life. So while I have had conversations with people who survived, I usually don't go to, like, survivors groups and stuff like that.
since the event, how has this impacted you personally?
Well, I used to jog, and I can't jog anymore. I can't do that anymore. It's just the knee is just too messed up. As far as politically, my politics haven't changed. People ask me, after because the bomber was, an Arab, do I hate Arabs? And I always tell them, I said, the guy who blew up on the bus was an Arab guy, but the nurse who held my hand in the hospital as, like, the morphine is, like, kicking in, and was also an Arab man. So, no, it hasn't, I take people as individuals, and it hasn't changed my politics. In fact, I had participated in a peace dialogue group at one point in time with Palestinians who were wounded. Some legitimately so. Like, some of them were members of bad groups that were wounded in the course of action and have decided now that they want to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict. And I met with them, hung out with them. So, yeah, my politics really haven't changed so much, and I don't know, some people's politics have. Like the girl who was scalped. She was like, she used to be very, very, like a peaceniker, like very dovish. And last time I talked to her, she was like to the right of Genghis Khan. I mean, really, like, hardcore. I mean, it upended her world, and I can't judge her for that. I mean, basically, her life was flipped upside down. So, yeah. So some people, it changes their politics radically, and some people, they just get on.
Yeah. When I was over there, I met with the organization. It's called One Family Fund. They're the organization that helps out the victims' families and the survivors deal with life. Like Chezi had all these kids, and the wife didn't work, so suddenly they had to raise money and make sure the kids taken care of. So she was saying there are people that, like, she mentioned about this one young lady who would not come out of her house.
Yeah.
And it was this beautiful girl who was messed up. And
she would just tell me, I feel like a monster, I feel like a monstrosity. I mean, she had the skin of her leg, it was stapled to her head, and with metal staples, and then she had like this mesh over. She had hearing problems. She couldn't see from one eye. Yeah, and she was just, she really became like a hermit. I don't know if that's changed. Hopefully that has changed, but I met her very soon after the bombing.
We, in fact, I wanted to show you, it was 2 summers ago. Actually, they had an event out here in the summer, and my daughter came down here to see the bus with a friend. And sitting in front of the bus, in the change holder there was a little book. And it turns out that, see how that has fallen down? It was up. And there was pretty much a custom where the drivers would put prayer books or little amulets and things up top of the bus. And it was missed. And I'll show it to you when we go back. It's there was actually a prayer book, a calling card, and this little booklet that's supposed to prevent fires in your home. And so these bus drivers would put it on their bus. Now, this one didn't work. But,
I had in my backpack, besides my gym clothes, I had a book on terrorism. Yeah, it was
irony.
It was Frantz Fanon's "Wretched of the Earth." It was like about Algerian terrorism, and like he was a bit of a, well, whatever. And I remember just like, oh, that book is gone. That book has gone to heaven. There's nothing left of that book.
Yeah.
It's just.
So if you want to learn more about the bus, just go to bus19project.com, bus19project.com. I try to find as much as I can. The stories on there, the bios, the people. There's video footage. It's all there. bus19project.com. Feel free to check it out. Anything else?
What would you say to us, knowing what our job is and trying to prevent something like this?
I guess the thing is, be polite, be respectful, be diligent, but also be aware, be cognizant of the threat. So if you're, no one likes to be suspected of potentially being, this malefactor, this, terrorist. With all that in mind, that's, when you're doing your job, you're doing a very important job. You're basically this iron wall between, the terrorist and the civilian. And in that role, just as much as possible, while you're being diligent, also be respectful of people who you might suspect might be your bad guys. I've had friends who worked at El Al Security, and there's always the guys who are doing their job and they're trying to be respectful and get down and identify people who might be bombers or bring things on a plane, and then you always have that dick who's power tripping, who wants to and he's yelling at this poor girl who just wants to get home to her family. You don't have to be the dick and still get your job done. That's basically what I would say.
How do you feel about public transportation in the U.S. and does it affect you today, time of day that you want to travel or what you take?
No,
not at all.
I just wish the L train serviced my neighborhood a little bit better. That's my feelings about public transportation.
I got you.
I want to thank Erik for coming down. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
We'll spend a couple minutes. If we can be back in the classroom, 15 minutes. So if you want to spend a few more minutes down here looking